Thank you, Senator Brockman. Senator Patrick.
Thank you, Mr Acting Deputy President. I thank Senator Brockman for his monotone and unconvincing contribution to the debate. Well, you know, if he wants to sit around and have a listen to what I've got to say, he may well learn a few things, as I have, as I've wandered around the country talking to small businesses. This bill, amongst other things, seeks to end Australia's innovative patent scheme. In committing itself to this course of action, the government drew upon a range of studies which argue that the current IPS does not deliver Australian small to medium enterprises what they need. Now, this is in direct contradiction to the submissions by SMEs and certainly does not reflect the views and experiences of a number of South Australian innovation-based companies that spoke to me personally on this issue. The government is suggesting that the IPS does not deliver on the intended purpose for which it is established, to incentivise research, development and innovation. Such commentary shows a disturbing lack of understanding about what drives Australian companies to innovate. Companies are motivated to conduct research and development for two predominant reasons: because they have an idea that will ultimately make them money, and because the government offers R&D tax concessions which help alleviate cost and risk associated with research and development grants. Now, Senator Brockman suggests otherwise. He suggests that the motivation for doing innovation here in Australia is because you can get a patent at the end. That shows a complete lack of understanding of business. And I don't mean to denigrate Senator Brockman. I know he's towing the party line, and he probably doesn't really mean what he says. But that is not the reason why people innovate in this country. Not at all. And I know, Mr Acting Deputy Chair, because I ran an R&D cell for about 10 years. I used the patent system. I know its traps, I know its benefits, but nowhere did my company ever suggest to me, when I was running an R&D cell, that the reason we were doing it was for anything other than to make some money at the other end with a good idea. The evidence provided by Mr Gibbs at the committee hearing, now he appeared in a personal capacity, but he was an intellectual property lecturer at Monash University and an IP attorney. His evidence was quite comprehensive and disturbing. He provided evidence showing how patent applications from Asia have risen from obscurity to dominance in the international patent application system over the course of the last 20 years. He stated, "China is now the biggest player in Asia, although Japan and South Korea are also big players too." Mr Gibbs stated that China recognises the importance of controlling intellectual property ownership before advising the committee that China has a regime similar to Australia's IPS called the utility model applications. He said, and I quote, "They are cheap and quick to obtain, and they last for a shorter term, whereas standard patents are expensive, take a long time to be granted and last for up to 20 years. By providing both types of patents and encouraging citizens to use them, China has succeeded spectacularly in growing its local ownership of patent rights and has translated this into extensive ownership of international patent rights. It's clear from the Chinese experience that there is utility in such a scheme." Now, I don't know if the government has noticed this, but China's economy is booming, and ours is sitting relatively flat, somewhat due to the fact that the government has no vision. In the Governor-General's speech, and I'm not critical of the Governor-General because, of course, he's just reading the message of the government, a whole bunch of housekeeping stuff on health and education and mental health, on infrastructure. They are important things, but if the Labor opposition had got into government, the same things would have been in the speech. There's nothing in there about vision. Nothing. So it's with the wisdom and based on false premise that the government is now moving ahead and abolishing the scheme. And, Mr Acting Deputy President, if you think I'm getting angry about it, I am, because I've spoken to South Australian companies who do not want this to go. And I'm going to explain exactly why they use the intellectual property scheme, the innovative patent scheme, and why the Productivity Commission has misconstrued its own statistics. Australia needs to be using every tool at its disposal to facilitate the protection of innovations. Mr Gibbs provided concerning evidence on the patent take-up rates in Australia. He advised the committee, in China each year 21 patent applications are filed for every 10,000 residents. In Germany it drops down to 10 per 10,000. In the US it's 9 per 10,000. In the UK it's 3. In New Zealand it's 2. Anyone want to guess what it is in Australia? 1.4. 1.4 applications per 10,000 people in Australia, compared to 21 per 10,000 people in China. Now, that is a telling statistic. If innovation patents were abolished, the figure for Australia would drop to 1.02 per 10,000 people. Importantly, he went on to say, in my opinion, the Australian government should be taking steps to improve Australia's future economic position by increasing the ownership of patents by Australians. If you're looking for reasons why Australia's productivity has been stagnating, then the number of Australian-owned patents per capita is a key indicator. In my opinion, the abolishment of the innovative patents would be a step in the wrong direction. I and many South Australians agree with Mr Gibbs. And now let me give the explanation as to why the Productivity Commissioner is wrong. I sat down with a number of companies last week, and look, I will acknowledge that the Minister's office attended and IP Australia attended, listening to a group of CEOs of South Australian companies, listening to the way in which they used innovative patents. Now listen carefully, because this is something that the Productivity Commission, for all its wisdom, for all its resources, didn't manage to discover. I talked to one company in South Australia who have 40 or 50 physicists working on innovative ideas, things that they can turn into products that they can then export and are exporting. Now, what happens is they spend about a year with 40 physicists working on something as a stepping stone to something else. So, just to give a make-up example to help the chamber out, you're trying to get to a new type of mobile phone, but you've got to have a number of steps along the way. Now, each of those steps are not necessarily things that you can patent using a standard patent. A standard patent might require, as another analogy, 100 points, and all that someone has to do to knock out a patent is knock away 1 point. If you're a 99, the patent doesn't stand. With the IPS, you only have to get to 80. And so you can use it to protect a stepping stone while you move to the next stepping stone, which you also protect with an IPS. And then the next one. And then finally you get to the point of a standard patent, where you now protect the idea that you want to take to market. And that's the reason why, when you look at the statistics, these IPSs are not renewed. They achieve a purpose and the company moves on, makes application for another one to protect the next stepping stone, and so forth. And that's going to go. And that company in South Australia is a great company, and it employs a number of South Australians, and it generates exports. And they are going to be harmed by a Liberal government that says that it's interested in exports, and a Liberal government that says that it's interested in supporting small business. Now, Senator Gallagher asked a question at the committee. He said to ask the government, is there a cost here? Is a saving if you get rid of the innovation patents? Do you save money? Answer from IP Australia, we don't save money. You are shutting down a scheme that is useful to Australian companies, and it's not going to save you a brass razoo. This is crazy stuff. It makes no sense to shut down the IPS when it is useful and valued by SMEs, and especially if retaining the system costs you nothing. And there's a certain arrogance of officials and indeed politicians standing up and telling companies, standing up and telling entrepreneurs who don't get a regular paycheck like we do, they don't get a regular paycheck like officials do. Everyone in this room, in this chamber, notes that at the end of the month or every fortnight they're going to get a paycheck. That's not what happens in the corporate world. You have to run a business sensibly. You have to work out ways to make money. It's these people that we are arrogantly telling what they don't need. Make no mistake, the South Australian companies I talk to want to retain this. And by shutting it down, you are hurting Australian businesses. And I am happy to invite, if anyone wants to contact my office, I'm happy to bring you down to South Australia and show you. You can talk to these companies because that's what the Productivity Commission didn't do. That's what IP Australia didn't do. And that's what the government didn't do. When we asked these companies about consultation, none of them were aware of it. None of them were aware of it. They were too busy making money, creating jobs, exporting materials overseas. They don't have time to watch what the Productivity Commission is doing. Now, of course, they could employ someone to keep an eye on the Productivity Commission, they could employ someone to keep an eye on the chamber, but these are people who are trying to do business. And you are trying to shut them down, you're trying to hurt them. And there is arrogance in officials and politicians doing that. Now, Labor has proposed some amendments and Centre Alliance will support them because it's the lesser of two evils. But I ask Labor whether or not you've got this in writing, whether you've got this secured, because I know what happened when you made a deal on encryption. It's an amendment. You made a deal on encryption, let legislation go through, and the government didn't honour that. And for some reason, you don't remember that. So I hope you have a solid commitment on this. And whilst Senator Pratt said she will be watching the government, I will be watching the opposition to make sure that you get what has been committed to you by the Liberal Party, by the Liberal coalition. Because if you won't, you will have sold out Australian SMEs. I will be moving an amendment later. I'll be asking for the support of the chamber, and I note that Senator Roberts is here. If Senator Roberts wants to come across to my office, I've got the submissions from Queensland companies that say they do not want this abolished. Okay? The bill does a lot of good things, but the schedule that removes the innovative patents scheme is flawed. It's not well thought through, and it's been designed by people remote from the real business world. So I urge people, when I move that amendment, to support it. Thank you.